Hello and welcome to the Championship Lowdown, a fairly different hosting duo for you this week as I return after an absence for a long period. And I'm joined by newcomer Tom, making its third appearance, isn't it, Tom?
I think so. Yes, I've come in hot, prolific every week. Here I am, hungover or no. Nothing can stop me.
Pleasure to have you part of the team. So I think, with that being said, with the way some of the teams have looked this week, I think we just jump right into the action, the way a lot of the Championship did themselves this weekend.
Absolutely. So I think we should probably start with the Portsmouth game as a bit of an outlier there. Really comfortable 3-0 for Portsmouth. A nice upturn in form, a lot of stabilisation for Portsmouth, especially now that Rich Hughes has made a few moves in the market. Edgar Adams slotting in very well, and Ali taking the weird sort of loan up the divisions and just looking really good. I don't really know what happened to him at Luton, but he looked very good last year in the Championship. I thought when he was at Exeter, he looked very good in League One, and he's looked great again today, stretching back lines, or yesterday rather, getting in behind. It was a lovely run. It was a really, really lovely pass as well that found him for that second. And West Brom just did not lay a glove at all on Portsmouth. Switched formation at half time from the three at the back, which has not been working at all, and it just didn't change anything. So a lovely routine win for Portsmouth, that in kind of a true relegation 6-pointer.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a West Brom result as well, isn't it? It's not a game. I think first half of the season, you look at this fixture on their list, you probably wouldn't have expected this result. Whether you'd have expected even a Portsmouth win. I mean, for me personally, especially with the way West Brom have been playing lately, I'd have absolutely looked at this game and said Portsmouth would take 3 points from Fratton Park. But in the manner they've done it is what's made this the surprise result of the weekend for me.
It was just so easy.
Yeah, they're absolutely a team who start of the season I never really had any worries about whether they'd be in that relegation fight. I thought they'd be in and around it, but I think they were a team who did the business, and they've continued doing the business this month, as you said, to keep them in this division. And if you're a Portsmouth fan and you look at your team doing business like this, you think we could go up this division, like climb the table and just keep finishing higher in the division.
And I think for them, the main problem has just been the injuries, right? You've got Shaughnessy out and then back and then out again for a really long time. You've got Josh Knight comes in, is out. Josh Murphy's hardly been fit at all this season. Callum Lang's injured, maybe leaving again. A lot of the Australian lads they've brought in have got injured a lot. And those are all quite lovely players that fit very well for the game model. And then you've gone out and done some sort of innovative business there. I do think there was definitely, for me, I think there was a bit of a worry because of their defensive injuries. You know, they've got Ogilvie at centre back and Swanson jobbing in at left back. And I think that should worry you at Championship level. But John Mousinho's kept his head. Rich Hughes kept his head. They didn't sack him, which would have been a terrible mistake. And I don't think he was super close, but they were beginning to discuss it. But they found options in January. They'll have players coming back. They've still got players to come off the bench and make an impact. Keshi Anderson is a reasonable impact player. John Swift barely played today again. So, yeah, I think they've solidified themselves and are pushing away from some of the teams in a lot of trouble. And West Brom are one of those that they've kind of just put into even more trouble. And again, it was 0.09 XG for West Brom. And XG doesn't tell the whole story of every game, but they just did not get anywhere near. They couldn't create. They brought in Danny Imre, who made his debut today, who's a very good attacking player. Didn't stretch the pitch at all, especially against the makeshift left back. It's almost like there's just no confidence in the team.
Yeah, and I think it's when you look at the run Portsmouth have coming up, it's a massive 3 points for them because February's looking to be a make or break month for them. You look at their next few games; they've got they've got Ipswich, Preston, Sheffield United, and they've also got Millwall and Wrexham all coming up before the end of Feb. So it's not an easy run coming up for them, and getting those points on the board now before that run is big for them. But from a West Brom perspective, how worrying is it now? Because it's now their 16th league defeat of the season.
It should be incredibly worrying now. You've just been very sad. It's not just the result, and it's not just the results. It's that the performances don't seem to be super coherent. Eric Ramsey's already kind of abandoned his three at the back, which maybe he shouldn't have implemented in the first place. Really, it feels a bit lazy to say this because they're both MLS managers coming to the UK, but it's got a Wilfred Nancy-esque kind of feel. Are you trying to do a bit too much, a bit too soon? But it didn't work, and they don't have long to sort this out because Portsmouth are playing better. They should pick up, even in that run, should pick up some results playing the way they are. Oxford, we'll talk about obviously later, were not terrible against Birmingham. They will pick up some results. So West Brom are just kind of relying on favours from others at the moment, and they're not going to get that many. The game against Stoke next for them is absolutely massive. Back at home, Stoke riddled with injuries. If they don't get something there, things are getting extremely toxic going into the derby against Birmingham.
Just to reiterate on the style of football you just mentioned for Ramsey as well, there is a stat that I saw yesterday, which is absolutely dreadful, which is that in 36 minutes of football, they completed 35 passes.
And I remember saying on, I think it's my first Championship lowdown, that his style of football with Minnesota was not beautiful. It was effective, but it was long ball, it was set pieces, it was hit teams on the break, it was play quickly and play forward, but it was not beautiful. It was efficiency, and it worked, and the fans bought into it and the culture of that club in Minnesota. But I don't think they are here really at all, not at Championship level. And it's one of those styles of football that if you're winning, you don't care. And if you're not winning, and if you're losing 3-0, you're in real trouble. And there's not a lot for them to hang their hat on at all. So, yeah, the next game is massive. A tactical rethink is needed. You'd expect them to start perhaps 4 at the back and go again. But yeah, really, really poor afternoon. Really big afternoon for Portsmouth, though. And you'd expect if they continue to stabilise, they will have enough in the tank to start to pull clear.
Yeah, and just to move on from West Brom now, I think regular host James will be a bit gutted to not be here this week because Swansea have pulled off an away win, and it became one of the Championship lowdown rarity jokes of a Swansea away win, but it's finally happened, and it's happened on a week where James isn't here.
Yeah, absolutely, but that's all right. We can talk about it. We can talk about it for him. And a massive one, not really going to talk much about Swansea, perhaps, because it's ended in Javi Gracia resigning because he's not motivated, according to the Watford press release. But from a Swansea perspective, just a really good win. They created some big chances, made the most of set pieces. Overall, kind of managed to dominate the game. Watford still had a number of chances, but they didn't really create that much that was all of that good. And then their set piece defending was weak. That's the second goal for Swansea, especially the Josh Key goal, just really weak defending. Just some of the basics just not done in terms of all of the good old sort of punditry stuff, putting your foot in and bodies on the line. It just wasn't any of that. And yeah, they managed to walk through Watford's back line. So good afternoon for Swansea, but Watford seemed to rather surrender that, and then the sending off in the last minute just kind of shows that they just kind of lost their heads there.
Yeah, it's one of those as well, isn't it? There's three things guaranteed in life: death, taxes, and Watford sacking a manager.
It's interesting though, because he resigned to the disappointment of the Watford board. I don't know. Have you read the full?
I did see. Yes, actually, he did resign. You are correct. That's my mistake on that one. Yeah, they're one of those clubs, and I've said it for a long time now. One thing I've always said in the Championship is that it's a black hole division. Once you're stuck there, you're stuck there. And I think Watford are the perfect embodiment of that since they've gone down for the Premier League again.
Yeah,
I mean, most clubs have fallen out of the Premier League, maybe fallen to League One and come back. But Watford seem to have just stayed in the Championship and don't really look like doing either, going up or going down. But at this point, for Watford, with the way things keep going, could going down to League One be a benefit for them? Because I think there's positives to relegation sometimes, which you don't look at. Sometimes when a club's in a sort of rut, the way Watford are in the past few years, going down might be that kick in the teeth that they need.
I don't think Watford should be thinking about that when they are so close to the playoffs. I mean, they're maybe I think it's 4 points off Wrexham. So they're in a weird kind of position where they had that bounce when Gracia came in and they played very well, and then they started playing very poorly. I think the fan base seems relatively split to me on Gracia's decision. Some thinking it's a real shame and it's classic Watford. Some quite happy that his defensive style of play is no longer going to be there, which seems odd because the amount of attacking players that Watford seem to have at their disposal is insane. To be honest, I think it's I think it's just a lack of coherent thinking. There seems to be an overall plan of, okay, we're going to now buy younger attacking players, but then why would you bring in a manager who's renowned throughout their career and you literally had in the building before for playing quite defensive football? It doesn't seem to marry up, and I know maybe he got a bit unlucky with Max Lane, for example, getting recalled, but there's just no joined up thinking, and I there's a really real good chance that if they could get their act together, that they could sneak into sixth place. I think sixth is relatively up for grabs, and so they really could push on. I think maybe they lack a little bit of midfield depth. You know, Kyprianou being out really hurt them. Kayembe's good, but not necessarily at holding the fort. So there are some gaps. I don't think it's a perfect team, but yeah, no, I think they should be looking at getting back as soon as possible. And I think they could do it this year. They just need to get their head screwed on, which they won't do. So perhaps they will just get caught in that black hole. But I don't think going down would help them in that regard, with such an unstable ownership.
Yeah, in this current Championship climate, it's not something that's realistic for a club like Watford. I think they're very inconsistent, and that would be my worry about this team reaching the playoffs. Is I don't think there's the consistency there for a playoff push from them. Not in terms of finishing in the playoffs, but in terms of competing over two legs against, say, one of the teams who've made a spot like that their own most of this season. Like, say, if Borough dropped out a second and finished in the playoffs, then they'd beat Watford over two legs easily for me. So I think there's that worry, and I think you've also got to look at, like you said, fifth is up for six is up for grabs. I think there's a lot of this table you look at and you think how they got there. Wrexham being one instance of that, and so on and so forth. And I think with the performances that have been discussed of Watford this season, that they could be one of those teams that you look at. You'd be forgiven if you didn't realise Watford were where they were with some of the performances that have been discussed this season. Because I've seen fixtures of theirs labelled some of the worst football they've seen this season.
Mm. And yet they have some of the outstanding individuals in the Championship. You know, people been talking about Loser as maybe the best player in the first half of the season. I think he's dropped off a little bit, but I don't think he's been bad. You've got Marma, who is insanely talented. Chakvatadze, incredibly talented, barely made it off the bench yesterday. I don't know, he's been injured a little bit, but you've got a lot of individuals who are proper standout or could be for the division. I just don't think there's the coherent ideas to platform them. I think defensively they'll come undone, and that's why I agree with you. I don't see them as likely candidates for promotion, or maybe serious candidates. They're a very kind of unserious team in a lot of ways, but they should be aiming upwards. They really should be. They've built a collection of talent that's really fun and making a complete meal of it.
Yeah. Speaking of how did that get there, though, I think it's fair to say that's a perfect point to move on to Derby County. Because if you're a Derby County fan, you're dreaming right now, aren't you?
You are, and you should be. You should be. I think that was one of those results when I don't think anyone could really believe what they were watching, to kind of echo yourself there on Friday night. I think Bristol City were just really bad. And I think it reminds me of Borough beating Preston 4-0 the other week, where you just go back and you watch it and you just kind of think City are just all over the place. They're not tracking runners. They're not pressing. They're losing the ball on the edge of their own box. There was just nothing going right. And so I think in a way, from a Bristol City angle, maybe, I think you could maybe square this one away a little bit as just one of those days, and you kind of got to bounce back properly from that. But for Derby, incredible performance, just incredible performance. And they have been on a lovely run. They've played a lot of really, I guess, poorer teams in the last couple of weeks in terms of Charlton and West Brom. Obviously, a decent kind of attritional win against Preston there as well. But yeah, I think they've got a lovely little team, and I think Eustace maybe has the best attacking talent he's had in his career. I know that there's some contention on this, but I love Patrick Agyemang. I think he's the perfect Championship striker. He is big, but he's also quick, but he also presses, but he also gets back and gets involved. Ben Brereton Diaz is the sort of winger equivalent of what Adam Armstrong is as a striker, maybe, or what Jordan Rhodes was in terms of too good for the Championship, but not good enough really for the Prem. But he's lovely at that level. Joe Ward, if all you ask him to do is spamming crosses, he'll be very good at that. Just don't ask him to do anything else. And everyone fits very well, and it's working quite nicely. This is a lovely moment because it ended in 5 goals, which Derby games don't do. But I think that's maybe a result of Bristol City being just really bad and Eustace having talent, I don't think he's always really had at the top of the pitch.
I think you've been the first person on the Championship lowdown to praise Patrick Ashimang. I don't know if you've ever heard James's opinions on him, but
yes,
we were very surprised when he hit his first goal for them. It's a second 5-goal thriller that Bristol City have been involved in, and it's the second time that it's been a shock result as well. The first one, obviously, being the opening day of the season, where they beat Sheffield United 4-1 and labelled some of the problems for Sheffield United. But again, a sort of team that have always had the potential to kick on Bristol City, and they've shown it last season. But again, consistency rues the problem for them.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a factor of they're a real in-between team, and it's almost like as soon as their players get good enough, they are gone, and they develop players. Obviously Semenyo and Scott, and now Anis Mehmeti, various different ways. Obviously, some of those were academy boys, and Mehmeti was purchased, but they do a good job of that, and they've got a good sort of solid team for the most part. They play in a way that a lot of teams choose to play, sort of the 3-4-3-ish or 3-4, 2-1, whatever you want to call it. But they do throw in the occasional 5-0 win. They beat Portsmouth 5-0 not too long ago, and the occasional kind of stinker. And I think that's a factor of having good Championship players, but not unbelievable Championship players. You can see what they're trying to do with kind of Pring and Tanner as the sort of wide centre backs, kind of, if you like, which kind of works. But it's just they're just not sort of top quality. I don't want to be too harsh because I do think that they're lacking a couple of players. Zach Viner, obviously captain's massive, and Atkinson is a massive player who would probably be starting in those defensive positions. But yeah, I just think they threw in a poor result. I think there's a little bit of low energy around the place after Mehmeti leaving. I know they brought in Bergzorg, but they're not the same. And Bristol City could win a game 5-0. They could lose a game 5-0. It's a bit lazy, but they'll finish in 12th again. And until they choose to really kick on or can keep a player for a full season.
Yeah, I think the most impressive thing about Derby County, though, with this, has been the way they've climbed the table since the injury to Carlton Morris. We sort of all sat there after Carlton Morris's injury and said, well, that's Derby in some serious trouble now. They could slip down the table, perhaps get dragged into that relegation fight, but they've done the exact opposite. And if Morris was to, I'm not sure how much longer he's got left out, to be fair, but if he was to come back before the end of the season, is that the boost Derby County need to perhaps finish in the playoff places?
Perhaps, but where does I know he's the talisman, but where does he go? If you look across the front line, and every single player, obviously it's 5-0, but every single player was involved in a goal, either a goal or an assist. Everything's clicking very nicely. Where does he come back in? I guess you've got that luxury in that Brewster and Ajerman can both kind of play wide if they need to. Brewster obviously is at the moment, but it's those are the kind of options that even if he doesn't come straight back in, that can lead you to be potentially a playoff team. And even if I don't necessarily love the standout names in terms of the defenders, Eustace has a game model that means that they defend very well. They don't have to be outstanding individuals necessarily. That's kind of not the point. So yeah, I think having players like that coming back, the additions that they are able to make in terms of obviously Travis coming in, but Oscar Fraulo as well, means that they've got a lovely kind of deeper squad there. Albeit the Derby fans will want us to point out that their, I believe it's third choice goalkeeper was there today, and Langas as well was also missing from the side. So the fact they did it with those are three massive misses as well. You know, in terms of keeper, defender, and striker, they're still doing it. They've still got depth. If they can win a few more, score a few more goals, as well as keeping them out, there's no reason why they couldn't be up there.
Yeah, and I think Morris is set to return this month apparently, but it does cause some headaches, like you said. But Derby and Eustace just seem like a match made in heaven, because Derby have obviously come up to the Championship with a point to prove and are very much proving that point right now. But Eustace himself has had a point to prove ever since the days he was sat by Birmingham, which was an absolute mistake. But I also think had Birmingham not got relegated that season, maybe the spending wouldn't have happened the way it did for them, and they wouldn't be the sort of team that they are now, kicking on. So, while it is a horrendous decision, I think it's worked out best for both of them, because if Eustace under that ownership had fallen short of playoffs, he'd have been gone anyway, I think, that season.
It's a little off topic, but yeah, the football that John Eustace plays is not sparkling. That doesn't particularly matter, and I don't want that to be seen as a criticism, because winning games, just look at where Derby County are in the table, right? That's not a criticism. But I don't think the flamboyant Birmingham ownership would have put up with Eustace Ball, and I think they just wanted an excuse to get rid of him. It worked out very poorly. But yes, I don't think that would have lasted for very long.
Yeah, and I think even though it's a 5-0 game, I don't think there's really much more to say on it. So we'll move on to our fourth game, which I think we struggled to think of our final game. I think we had 5 games nailed on to include, and then the last game we struggled. I think we settled on Stoke Southampton in the end.
Yeah, which is, it's an important game for Southampton winning away and getting that in. And I think there were some moments of real individual quality. I think Harwood Bellis's pass for the first goal was brilliant. Complete, like, splitting the lines, beating everyone, fellows in. That's exactly what you want from the way that Southampton set up. I think Stoke were pretty flat, and they didn't threaten that much apart from kind of really, really pretty technically gifted kind of long range shots. But aside from that, it didn't really do too much. Even, Mark Robbins threw on subs at half time. It didn't really do that much. Conceded from a set piece, albeit it's very difficult to mark Ross Stewart. But I just think Southampton, it's a lovely bit of respite. Winning away from home is not something they've done super often. It's good to see the system working effectively for them. And for Stoke, it's just, they're sort of petering out. And you do feel sorry for them with the injuries, but the season just seems to be slowing down.
Yeah, and I think if you're a Southampton fan, you could pretty much write this season off at this point. I don't really think they're gonna. Well, it's clear to see from the inconsistencies again that you're not going to see much from this Southampton team this season in terms of table position. You can certainly put this down to a very disappointing season where I think most people, if you ask them where would Southampton finish this season, they'd have expected an immediate return to the Premier League for them.
Yeah, they would have done. I do wonder, because we have said earlier that sixth is up for grabs. Southampton are incredibly 7 points off sixth, albeit they're down there in 14th. They're not showing the consistency anywhere near that you would need to be up there, and I'd imagine they'd want another striker in once Armstrong goes, which is not confirmed yet, but looks very likely. You'd imagine they might put their hand in their pocket in the dying days of the window, well, the last day, it's possible they would. So I wonder. I don't speak to loads of Southampton fans, but I wonder if they would write this season off, or whether they'd think it's worth making a nice big push. Because 7 points, they haven't looked good enough to do it, but 7 points is not many points right now.
No, and I think the push is fine, but I think you look at the teams above. You look at the teams above who Birmingham putting a nice little run together right now. They're a team I'd say would be more likely to steal that spot than Southampton, and you've obviously got Bristol City looking to make a response. So I think the good thing there is you look at all the teams above Southampton between them and 6, is the form's dropping off for most of them. You know, Bristol City, 1 win in their last 5. Preston have 3 defeats in their last 5. So no one really has any form together other than Southampton and Birmingham, whereas Birmingham's is in the midst of it, and Southampton are just starting to build a nice little run with 3 games unbeaten.
And I think Birmingham are a really good example there that you bring up, because that's kind of what Birmingham were kind of, a little bit maybe middling form, good performance, bad performance. And then they've gone out and they spent a whole bunch of money, because they can spend a whole bunch of money. And that seems to have given them a bit more depth, a bit more solidity. And it looks like they're probably putting a little bit of a run together again. And I think Southampton are a club that should be looking to do that, because, okay, they would have been hoping for the autos, but they're not going to get that now. The playoffs are well within reach. The league table doesn't tell the full story. Look at the points. They spent a little bit of money there to get in another striker, with no disrespect to the Loch Ness Drogba. It's that could look very exciting. And they could start to challenge Birmingham, because, again, very good teams like Derby that we mentioned there, between them in the playoffs, none of those teams are insurmountable, or should be insurmountable if you're Southampton.
No, absolutely. And it's just another, while we say they got the result, and you talk about football not always being attractive, it's a case of a game that's just not really had much to talk about. I think the most you're talking about in this game is the 2 penalty shouts from Southampton.
Yeah, I think, having watched it again this morning, I think Finazaz deserved his yellow. I think he deserved that one. I think that was quite poor. And again, it's possible, but they got the win regardless.
Yeah, from a Stoke side who, one point, were pushing on the automatics, but had just been a point proven of how quickly things can turn around in this division. A few months ago we were talking about Coventry, Borough, Stoke all chasing each other, and now you're looking at Stoke potentially not even finishing in the playoff places.
No, and they should get some players. As they get some players back, they'll probably improve. And you're right, it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about them in a far more positive and kind of serious light. And it wasn't that long ago they were kind of on a decent enough run. They were picking up decent wins, early into sort of early Jan. So yeah, for them, I think it's maybe just shaking this off. A lot of these clubs in this kind of mid-table are going to go on good and bad runs. If it happens to coincide when you've got 3 keepers injured, there's probably a little bit of forgiveness there, albeit I think Simkin did well enough today. So yeah, Robbins will rally the troops, get some players back, and depending on how mentally sound they are after this run and how many players they end up getting back will depend on if they can make that real charge, or if they just get overtaken.
Yeah, well, we spoke about Southampton not being where we expect them to be, but I think you'd be more surprised looking at where Leicester are right now, wouldn't you?
Not if you watch the performances. You'd have to say they're in exactly the right place. Maybe it's a little bit different today with yesterday with the sending off, which was just, I can't understand why players do that so early on in the game. Was it 15 minutes? And
I think it was the 15th minute, yeah.
He's pulled him down, and it's so obvious. There's no reason to say I think Miles Leeburn's a good player, but he's not, odds on to score necessarily from that if he goes through. There's no reason why Okoli wouldn't have been able to keep that catch up or someone else. It's just, and it was 1-0 after 15 minutes. That's not the end of the world. It's just nothing makes sense in terms of the decision making on that one, and it just kind of mirrors the head loss. Jordan Ayew's hitting the post again, just kind of disbelief between players who should be better than that. Okoli was an expensive addition who, was okay in the Premier League in a pretty awful season. Jordan Ayew is a useful, technically sound, good player, good pro, and everyone just seems to be just completely off it. And the talent's still on the pitch, and it's just not coming through. I think fair play to Charlton, who just very professionally kind of took care of this, made sure Leicester didn't get too close to their box too often. A lot of the shots were from range. A lot of shots for Leicester, not a lot of big chances. Really good finishes as well from Charlton. I think Sonny Carey's finish was really nice. And I still really like Lyndon Dykes playing for Nathan Jones. I think that makes all the sense in the world. So very professionally done from Charlton, but yeah, Leicester there's no rest. There's just no rest for them.
Yeah, and I think I when they went down, I felt Leicester could maybe make a comeback again. Them and Southampton, I did sort of expect an immediate response from them, but you look at the lineups of Leicester, and it's not a yesterday's starting 11. It's not a starting 11 that you're ever looking at and thinking, okay, that's going to walk this division. I think if you look at any of that lineup that's getting into a team that's going up in this division, the only player I'm taking on a promotion charge with me is Abdul Fatawu, who seems to always be the shining light for Leicester. Ricardo Pereira, very surprising to see him still a Leicester player, to be fair.
Yeah, he's struggled a lot, I think, as well. And I think it's so strange, right? Because Mavididi last time round was very, very good. Really dangerous player. And, we're looking at player, he looks a shadow of himself. Bobby de Coventry is a useful player, similar to Ayew, though. They're useful, they're technically gifted, they're good for the level. They're maybe not standouts any longer. The midfield, I know that Page is highly rated, but looks a little bit lost. It's almost unfair to play a player in such a toxic environment at that age. Maybe Chowdhury was he right back most of the time for Sheffield United last season on loan. These are players who should be better than where they are, but I wonder how much this gives us an insight into what it's really like when things are bad off the pitch. Like, it's difficult to quantify how that affects you on the pitch, but I do wonder if it's just that bad throughout the club, and it's just in their heads so much that it just comes out in just really strange performances.
Yeah, for Leicester, I mean, with the points deduction looming over them, it's League One's a really realistic possibility for them now, isn't it? Wouldn't you say?
It does depend on how many points. I mean, if it's 9, let's say, that puts them, I believe, kind of level with Blackburn there in the sort of the bottom. And 9, I don't think, is a ridiculous prediction for what that might end up being. Although, of course, we don't know. But yes, that if we're talking about how much morale is affecting players who should be, in air quotes, better than this, you get 9 points, you're level with Blackburn. yeah, it doesn't look good, and it doesn't look like you're getting much help here in January by the way of players. You've got players going out, so I mean, it would be crazy for a team that has Abdul Fatawu to go down to League One. But if they get a significant points deduction, they're in real trouble. And I don't believe we're any closer to knowing who the new manager is going to be. And I don't know that we can judge Andy King on today. You can't plan for a Coley doing that in the 15th minute.
Just before we move on, I will throw it out there though. We talk about them going level on points with Blackburn. Blackburn do have a game in hand, which they play on Tuesday, and I think you'd fully expect 3 points from Blackburn in that fixture because it's Sheffield Wednesday. However, if there was any team in this division that is likely to drop points to Sheffield Wednesday right now, it's a delicate sentence to say because in no way is it disrespectful to Sheffield Wednesday at all. It's just the nails in the coffin already for Wednesday. And I think the fans have accepted it. The players seem to have accepted it too and are just playing for pride at this point and did themselves proud a bit this weekend, maybe against Wrexham, keeping it to just 1 goal. Obviously, the big thing has been no goals in January from them. But you'd expect Blackburn. You do have an interesting matchup between Blackburn and Leicester going down in League One, because it would obviously be the only 2 Premier League champions who have fallen to the 3rd division. So, I mean,
yeah, and I think it speaks to that. How much does the off the field stuff affect the on the pitch? And I know Blackburn, I feel like we're saying it a lot, but a hell of a lot of injuries, albeit they have gone out and spent money. Jorgensen, for example, up front. But I think it does speak to how pervasive a toxic environment off the pitch can be to on the field concerns. Even when you've got talented footballers, if everything's all at sea off the pitch, it seems to find its way onto the pitch. And yeah, you've got 2 former Premier League champions, both of whom fans turn against ownership, both of whom look like they're going in the wrong direction. Of course, Leicester still have players that could pull them out of it, and they've still, both teams still have the card of changing manager and seeing if they can get something from that. But yeah, tough, very tough times for Leicester fans who I do not envy.
I will say one thing before we move on is that you mentioned a team with Abdul Fatawu going down to League One. Someone in the Championship will be getting Abdul Fatawu for a bargain this summer, if Leicester go down.
Someone in a top 5 division in Europe will be getting him for a bargain. To be honest, I mean, maybe a Premier League team even. Someone's going to get a good deal.
But we spoke a lot about teams going down today, but I think it's finally time we talk about sort of the elephant in the room in the Championship right now, isn't it? Have Coventry finally bottled it?
They're trying to. They're really trying to pretty hard. I think that's a bit too strong. I think they were getting a bit luckier in the first half of the season, scoring worldies and bangers and not conceding maybe when they should have done, and Rushworth playing extremely well. There seems to be just a lack of structure somewhere in the middle of the park. I think they keep getting caught on turnovers and counterattacks way too easily. I think you saw that really clearly for QPR this weekend, and they still have incredible attacking talent. The cross for their first goal was very good, but those moments are coming slightly less frequently. The turnovers are coming more frequently, and I mean Rushworth can't keep everything out. He's doing his best, but he can't do everything. I still think they're a good Championship team, but I do think they're just a good Championship team. I think they kind of rode a hot hand a little bit, and now variance is kind of coming back on them a little bit, and their performances have dipped. They have got less solid in the middle, for sure, and they're getting run through a bit too often. But I still think they're a good Championship team. I just think that's all they are, and they've managed to get to the top, and they're not capitalising on it. But I don't necessarily think they should have been there in the first place.
Yeah, as we know, I got plenty of stick when Coventry had their run at the start of the season, but yeah, the main thing for me was, and I will always take opinions on board, and the main thing, if this is football, and the main thing about when a player or a manager hears an opinion about themselves, it's just about proving them wrong. And I think maybe Coventry have got too complacent in areas with the sort of lead they had at the start of the season. I don't know. QPR obviously had revenge on their mind in this fixture with the way the last one went around. So that could have played a factor too. But I've seen people say it's the most QPR thing to do as well. You know, they lose at home to Wrexham and then go ahead and beat the league leaders, who at one point looked like one of the most unbeatable teams this division saw. And at one point we would compare them to what, you know, Daniel Farke's Norwich used to do to this division, what Fulham used to do to this division. And I think those comparisons have been proven wrong now, obviously, because the thing was with those sort of teams was when they lost, they reacted. And there's not really been much of a reaction from this Coventry team to the losses, I think, especially when they've done business in January. I think they've done good business in January, bringing in Romain Esse. So
they have, but again, I mean, it depends. We don't know how long Mason Clark will be out injured for. Obviously, losing him would be a massive blow. But they've got a good tight squad. That's fine. But I don't think they had the depth or outstanding quality necessarily. I think of maybe some of those sides, and I think they want to play the right way, and they've got the right profiles for it, like Matt Grimes, for example. And then you've got the energy of Eccles, but they are leaving just too much space. They don't have you kind of, if we're looking at sort of Falcon Norwich sides or Leeds sides, you know, they don't have Ethan Ampadu in the middle there. You know, they don't have that kind of force that means they can stop people coming back the other way. They can play really nice stuff going forward, but they don't have maybe the steel that I think the really, really good Championship sides of old, as you know, many goals as they scored, they had some real stoppers in there. They've got a lot of energy. They've got a lot of very, very good, talented players with potentially high ceilings. I just don't think they've got the steel necessarily to stop teams coming the other way. Also, probably a note on QPR here, who have been on a bit of a difficult run, not a lot of great results recently, and I think this is a massive one for them. You know, they've lost a lot of their edge since Burrell got injured. So it's a massive goal for Kone, who's still looked very, very busy and looked brilliant, but massive for him to get a goal. Here, the quality of the goals was pretty high as well. That finish. They've got Ronnie Edwards back in, who has slotted in very nicely. We talk about that steel that Coventry don't have. You know, you look at kind of the other side of things in kind of an old timer almost in kind of Isaac Hayden, who does kind of have that, and Dunn and Cook. And so they've been on a difficult run, but this is a massive result, I think, for QPR, and I think a deserved victory as well. I think a really well executed game plan.
Yeah, I think they'd relish it if Coventry didn't go on to win the league as well, with QPR being obviously the only other team to have been top at Christmas and not go on to win the division in the days of Michael Beale's departure a number of years ago. But I mean, the lack of steel for Coventry it's something that causes concern about a team going up to the Premier League, doesn't it? When you look at these sort of teams, especially when Daniel Farke's Norwich used to walk this division and then performed so poorly in the Premier League and almost immediately go down and do it again. And it was a case of they were too good for the Championship, but not good enough for the Premier League. And I think you could almost bank on, with this lack of steel that we talk about Coventry having, that they wouldn't go up this season and next season perform, say, how Sunderland have outperformed everyone's expectations this season. So I think that's the only concern is, I think you could almost say this Coventry team goes straight down with the way that this sort of form has dipped.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think at this rate they will finish in the autos. I mean, I don't necessarily. I think they will improve and they will win more games than they lose between now and the end of the season. But I also think that Middlesbrough will win just as many. They're now level on points. Hull seem like they can't lose. Their goal has got some sort of charmed life that nothing can go in and everything goes in the other end. I mean, Ipswich, maybe we'll touch on them a little bit, but Ipswich should have blown Preston away, really. At the weekend, and got a little bit unlucky, which I don't think necessarily will continue. So I think Coventry have got a lot more to worry about in terms of maintaining this form in order to stay in the top two, because they are too easy to play through right now, and they play really nice stuff and they want to have the ball, and that's great, but they are too easy to play through. They are turning the ball over too often, and you don't want to go too negative and maybe put doubts in the mind of the players in terms of the way that they play, but something needs to be adjusted, I think, in there, because it's just too easy to get at them on the break. So I think we saw on Monday with Norwich as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to finish off there, we speak about Ipswich, but I think you need to be looking at Hull more. The past 10 games, Hull have made 11 points on Coventry. They're sitting third, 2 points clear of Ipswich, who look to be struggling to pick up wins again. Again, another team who you expected to be dominating this automatic playoff race after their Premier League form last season, where they almost didn't deserve to go down, I don't think. I think they deservedly went down in the end, but there was still performances where they didn't deserve to go down. I mean, if you look at, for instance, one thing that rings true to me last season was how Ipswich did worry people. So if you look at the 1-0 win Arsenal edged out against them, where Arsenal were taking the ball to the corner flag to waste time against Ipswich. So I think that said a lot about an Ipswich team that caused problems last season in the Premier League and maybe didn't 100% deserve to go down. But Coventry have a chance to make up for this with Middlesbrough coming up for them. So I think anything but a win in that game will show how Coventry season ends. I think if they don't beat Middlesbrough, they're not winning the league. If they lose to Middlesbrough, I don't think they're finishing in the autos.
It could be a hot. I mean, they've got an assignment against Oxford first, who will make life very tricky for them, and who will try and play on those kind of worst nightmares. Like, they will come to sit a little bit deeper and counter on them. So they will try to kind of be Coventry's worst nightmare there. But yeah, that game on Monday night is huge for Coventry. It's at home as well, and so I think that's where you're right. The morale, if you were to lose that game to Middlesbrough, that would kind of break the morale maybe a little bit. You could feel maybe the air coming out of Coventry if that were to happen at home as well.
Yeah. And I think that's the perfect place to end it. We'll just run through some of the other scores, because I think with the Championship this week, there was just a lot of nothing fixtures, really, wasn't there?
Vintage weekend.
So Millwall 1-1 draw against Sheffield United. Again, Sheffield United, we all know what the story is with them, and similar to Southampton, where it's just a matter of playing for a solid position. I think Wilder, we said Wilder signed a 2-year deal, didn't he?
Mm.
So you probably expect Sheffield United to do what Sheffield United do to this division next season, maybe with a solid summer.
Yeah, yeah, it was a really nice goal from Brooks. Just worth mentioning. Obviously, got pinned back very quickly. Pretty even game. Either side could have won it. Yeah, kind of playing into sort of. It was a decent game, but yeah, nothing major. No major conclusions to be drawn. I don't think.
Yep, and Hull picking up a 1-0 win at Blackburn, making up that points gap on Coventry, as we said. Where again, if you're a Hull fan, are you dreaming like Derby fans?
I think they are, aren't they? I mean, we should mention that the Kumas goal looks very offside. It looks really offside. So maybe a bit of fortune. I think they were probably the slightly better team. Created some of the better chances over the 90, so probably deserved overall. But look, when everything's going your way, it just doesn't stop, does it? You know, you get those little offside goals. It was a lovely bit of play to get it to Kumas, but yeah, they just keep rolling on. They edged that game out, and even if the goal itself wasn't correct, they probably deserved it.
Yep, and we spoke about an away Swansea win. We had an away Birmingham win on the same week as well. But I think, we said about Birmingham picking up some form, so you'd have absolutely expected nothing but a win from a game against Oxford in the most respectful way possible to Oxford, because they're a modest team in this division compared to the rest, but they've done themselves proud. If they were to go down, they've done themselves proud this season.
Yeah, and I think they're going down fighting. I think they were in this game for large parts. I think they were kind of overwhelmed by quality in the end. You know, you're bringing on your new, was it £7 million striker for Stansfield? It was another £7 million, was it, for Carlos Vicente? It was a lovely bit of play from him for the second as well as a lovely little bit of interplay. So I still think there's life in Oxford yet. I like what Bloomfield's trying to do there. I think his job at Luton when they were in the Championship is a little bit underrated. I think he was just given a little bit too much to do there. So, yeah, I think Birmingham just overwhelmed them with quality, and I think that's what happens when you can go out and spend 14 million.
Yeah, and Ipswich drop points again to Preston. Again, probably a bit of concern now for Ipswich in this auto race, maybe.
Yeah, they just keep losing too much ground, and I know the penalty came in the 92nd minute, but they bombarded the Preston goal. I think it was a miracle that they didn't win that game, but I think there are a lot of games like that now that are kind of stacking up where they're not taking their chances sooner. I think Hurst missed a couple today, I think, that he really should have taken in the second half. So concern, but the performances are still very good. But they can't keep playing well and not winning forever.
Yeah, and hindered slightly by Borough picking up a win over Norwich as well. So I think Borough will probably make that second spot theirs. I think if you can bank on anyone finishing top two, it would be Middlesbrough for me.
Yeah, I think they're putting together a more consistent run now. They've gone through a couple of dips this season, but it's a tricky assignment playing Norwich at the moment. I thought Coventry probably had too much for them on Monday, and they absolutely didn't. So Norwich are playing now like a very respectable side. They have some players in really good form. Middlesbrough just kind of dealt with this very efficiently. They made the most of the high turnover they forced. It was a really nice goal from Hayden Hackney. Saw it out pretty professionally against a pretty decent Norwich side with kind of their tails up, certainly in the last few games. So, yeah, they're putting together a nice run. And that game against Coventry is just huge. If they can avoid defeat there, they can take so much confidence.
Yeah, and finally, Sheffield Wednesday finish January without a goal. Wrexham, I think if you're a Wrexham fan, you'd have probably wanted to see the back of the net hit a few more times, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you might have done, but I do wonder if a lot of teams turn up to Sheffield Wednesday and do enough to get a result, as opposed to do the most necessarily. So I don't think not too much for a black mark. Look, they won the game. There's not too much of a black mark against their name for not battering them. And I mean, they did create a reasonable amount anyway. So yeah, I wonder if everyone's not putting in 110% against Wednesday.
Yep, that's all we have time for this week. That's all 12 games in the Championship covered. We'll be back later on in the week. Probably be Ollie and James, I'd imagine, or someone else for the preview show. But until next time, thanks for listening.
Thank you.